On to focus on the men of the hour here. The hardest job I had today was to try to pare down their bios a bit. They're pretty deep and very impressive. Just from the quality, First, I wanted to introduce Craig Ustler. Craig started as an MAI. He's also a CCIM, which is a designation in the real estate industry, and president of Ustler Development. He focuses on urban infill real estate and business development in downtown Orlando. He's the developer of many notable projects, including the Residence Inn, you may know down the street in downtown Orlando, 800 North Orange office building, the Ivy Apartments at Health Village, the GAI building, Thornton Park Central. He's worked and developed over $200 million worth of projects. A very significant project, which we're here today to talk about, is Creative Village. It's a 68-acre urban mixed-use transit-oriented development at the former Orlando Arena property in downtown. I think most of us know where that's at. The City of Orlando awarded the project to a joint venture between Bank of America Community Development Corporation and then a local entity led by Craig. And we actually talked beforehand about just the significant power of connecting the real estate community as well as corporate users in the community and the flywheel effect that can be created from that. And to be honest, I think that's one of the things we would love to dive into and take away a little bit today and think about. Craig's also been involved in a number of other opportunities in the region, including a number of restaurants in the downtown Orlando area that many of you would know. And his background is in urban economics. He has a master's degree as well in real estate and urban analysis from the University of Florida. Thad Seymour is Vice Provost for the UCF Downtown campus. Following nearly 3 decades as a business leader, Thad recently returned to the academic setting where he started his career to become the Vice Provost for UCF's Downtown campus in June of 2016. It'll be set in an urban core and designed to accelerate economic, social, and cultural impact for the city and this region. Thad will help bring the new 7,700 student campus to life as an innovative model of 21st century higher education with a core team of UCF and community leaders at the helm. Thad's business career included senior executive roles with large healthcare and technology companies, as well as multiple early-stage businesses that he was part of. Most recently, Thad was a senior vice president at Tavistock Development Company, where he led strategy and development of the Lake Nona Medical City campus, which also include a number of innovation clusters, the USTA Association relocating their headquarters, and the Lake Nona Institute. Thad serves on several boards in the region. He's currently the chair of the board here in downtown Orlando of Canvas, which is a nonprofit co-working organization space in the downtown area. And Thad holds a Bachelor of Arts from Dartmouth College, a Master's of Arts and doctorate from the University of Wisconsin, and an MBA from the Kellogg School of Northwestern University. He and his wife, Katie, have 3 grown children. Please join me in welcoming Craig and Thad.
Gentlemen, thank you. Welcome, and welcome to everyone here. My name is Case Thorp, and I'm the Senior Associate Pastor and get to lead the collaborative efforts. So you honor us with your presence. Greg, thank you for that. He is one of our fine advisory board members, and there's a number of others out here. Raise your hand if you're on their advisory board, and let's just recognize them and thank you all for being here. And also in the room are our Orlando Fellows, our program for recent college grads to look at their integration of faith, work, and economics. So fellows, let's give a wave too and see where you are in this room as well. So Craig and Thad, thank you. I was thrilled upon first hearing about the Creative Village and how it's going to unfold and impact our community. So the fact that you're here is exciting for us, and we're eager to see what unfolds. So as we get now to our 6 questions, I want you to know that these questions were written first by myself, shaped by our team, and even some on social media helped us to get to these. And speaking of social media, if you want to check in on Facebook, we will not judge you for picking up your phone. And if you want to mark us on Twitter, it's @MyCollaborative. That would be good to help us get the word out. So without further ado, let's get now to our first question. Craig, could you briefly give us just an overview of your career, those other development projects that have succeeded here, maybe some that were a struggle along the way, and how you first came to this vision for Creative Village?
So I'm 40, I'm either 48 or 49. Mike, how old are you? 48 or 49? Yeah, so Mike Spraggins and I grew up together. We went to school together. But so I'm a third generation Orlando guy on both sides of my family, and grew up in College Park, and that's what I thought was how you did, cities and real estate development. I thought everybody lived like that. So I went to college and started looking for what I wanted to do, and I just liked my family was in real estate. I liked neighborhoods. I liked in-town neighborhoods. I knew how strong College Park was. Delaney Park, Thornton Park, if it had a park behind it in Orlando, it kind of made sense. And so, I was an appraiser for a while and a broker for a while, and sort of did all this stuff to cut my teeth, and then started out just renovating houses in Thornton Park in the early 90s. Dexter's was the first major deal I did. And it just, kind of sprung from there. And you go through market cycles, obviously, so the mistakes that you make sometimes aren't your own. I mean, it's just that the timing's bad. But you learn something from all of them. So, I mean, as you get older, you kind of have this perspective of sort of what works and what doesn't work. Some of the best deals you do end up not making any money because the timing's wrong, and sometimes you screwed some stuff up. But you're like, oh my gosh, it worked out great because you just got lucky on the timing. So it's, you have to sort of be able to look at it under those circumstances.
So it's not always natural talent.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's it's the old thing where preparation and luck meets opportunity kind of thing. So it's a lot of factors. But the real estate piece of it has always been interesting to me. But at some point, a light bulb kind of came in about this community and real estate being able to go together. And it wasn't that exciting to me to just execute a real estate project for the sake of a real estate project. So just, building a building and sort of whatever, and then you sell it and go on to the next one. That was not as interesting to me as using real estate as a toolkit to kind of impact community. And I got really interested in Thornton Park. We did so much stuff in one neighborhood that made the whole neighborhood better. And we started getting these compliments about, okay, well, you improved the neighborhood instead of just saying, oh, you built a nice house or a nice building. So,
or just walked away with a handy profit.
Yeah. I mean, so it's almost like you had to make a reasonable profit, but you could do it in a way that positively impacted the community. And my toolkit or my skill set is real estate. So some people can make a difference through faith or whatever. So that's the way I balanced it in my mind. So Creative Village is just a bigger version of that. This Paramore has been a problem. It's been something I've never understood growing up here. Why we put I-4 where we did, and school desegregation and all that. A lot of social things at play in Paramore, and it just frustrated me as an urban planner that we couldn't do anything about it. And so I convinced myself, along with the partners that we put together, that we could do something about it and come up with a vision that it essentially is an education-based innovation district vision for the West Side, and that could improve Paramore permanently and for the long haul. And we had seen this work in other markets. We were talking about Charlotte earlier, New Orleans, Detroit, Baltimore. That's where Bank of America has been real active in that regard. So that's how it came about. It wasn't spreadsheet driven or like, we're going to make this amount of money and do this or this development program and all that. That's part of it. I mean, that gets you sort of to the end result. But at the end of the day, it was just this community idea about doing what was right for my hometown and making a difference in an area that has been underserved and essentially disinvested in for a long period of time.
Okay. Wow, thank you. Thad, now I mentioned earlier, I just learned that your father was the president at Rollins College at one point. I don't know if everybody in this room knows that. But help us get a sense of your career, your steps along the way, and how you've come to this position at UCF, and then UCF's internal conversation of why this project makes sense for y'all.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for the invitation. This is great. It's always fun to talk with Craig. I always learn something from him when we're together. And just on that last point, one of the things I most admire about Craig is he's one of those guys whose life is driven by mission, and this desire to make a profit while making a difference is really what he's lived out. He doesn't just say it, he does it. And the work we're all doing together around Paramore and the west side of Orlando, I think is a chance to really make a difference. And we're glad you all are interested in trying to figure out how do you all help, because that's going to be important. Starting, I guess, with the first question. So last year, I had the honor of being the commencement speaker at Trinity Prep. And one of the themes of my talk was, and the parents didn't necessarily want to hear this, but I think the kids maybe did, which was, as you think about your career, celebrate the crooked path. And that was mostly just excusing my totally wacky career, trying to find justification for it. And so there you go.
You didn't plan to be sitting in this chair.
But to your point, Case, I grew up on college campuses. My dad was a professor turned administrator, every time in small liberal arts colleges. And so I kind of saw that world, saw the impact he and my mom were having, and felt like that would be a logical career. And taught high school for a couple of years, mostly because I wanted to coach, but also taught history. Enjoyed that, decided to go to grad school, went to Wisconsin, did that. But
You did that in urban design, or?
Actually in American history.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with, I'm a wannabe around anything related to real estate. I've learned from a lot of other people. But it was completely around an unconnected field, except that I really believe an enormous amount of what I learned through that experience I've been able to apply to my career. We can talk about that. But got near the end of my PhD and realized, you know what, my wife had, in the meantime, gone to business school. I saw this world of business, which was never part of our table conversation when I was growing up. It was sort of, math and business were not, it was poetry and, whatever else. But I was fascinated by it, and so shifted gears, went to business school, and was also in the late 80s interested in technology. Went to work for a software company, had a great time doing that. Ended up, this is in Chicago, ended up being recruited down here in November in Chicago, which was a pretty easy sell.
Now, were you doing history for them, or this was completely separate from your academic work?
I was fascinated by technology, the business of technology.
Okay.
And just as a metric, I went to work for a software company in 1987, which was the third largest in the world with $300 million in sales. So, Google does that in an afternoon.
Yeah, I'd say they did that in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's been fascinating to watch that industry change. Anyway, moved down here to work for a healthcare company, kind of pivoted from pure technology into healthcare technology. Did 2 or 3 startups, most of them in that field. Kind of got the feel of early stage business creation, which was a lot of fun. Moved from there into specialty pharmacy, which is another fascinating industry, and then got recruited out of the blue to go to Lake Nona and the Tavistock group to imagine a brand new city out in the middle of nowhere, and led the strategy for what has now become Lake Nona Medical City, and $3 billion of real estate construction, and just warming up in so many different ways. I hit 60, said, I wish I could say 48, hit 60, and my wife and I said, kids were gone, said, maybe it's time to slow down. And completely failed at that, because 3 months after that, Dale Whitaker, the provost, who I just saw as one of the 8 finalists for the, or semifinalists for the UCF presidency, as of this morning, persuaded me to come and join the university to help lead the strategic plan. So I spent 9 months.
Strategic plan for UCF or for this project?
UCF, for the university, which was a wonderful opportunity. I would wish it on anybody, because it gave me a chance to really see from the inside what had happened at UCF, and more importantly, where it could go. So I spent 9 months doing that, and it was an absolute blast, and it gave me this enormous appreciation for this institution and its role in Orlando, and particularly its future. And was going to go and do my own thing again, and then Dale said, I got one more idea. It looks like we're going to get the downtown campus, and would you consider leading that effort? And I agreed. It was just too important to downtown. Had gotten to know Craig and other partners in this, and believed that this was something where we could make a difference. And so I've been doing that for about a year and a half.
I mean, who in this room gets to build their own office, right?
Yeah.
Right?
But we're not going to have offices. It's open office.
Oh,
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's not quite true. I'm not going to have an office.
Do you get your own bathroom? Yeah.
This is the 21st century. We don't think about it.
Right. So question number 2. We all are a little sad. Amazon passed us up in Orlando for its second headquarters. Now, though, the buzz has turned to Apple. and where might Apple's second headquarters go? And I know there's a lot of energy amongst the leaders in Orlando to try to secure such a thing. Help us from your seats place Orlando in its ability to attract these sorts of wins. Help us place Orlando both in Florida, the Southeast, and nationally, and then bring it back to Creative Village. How is that going to help us as we compete for future growth?
Want to go first?
I'll give it a run. So I think it's a great question. Let me back up, go up one other level, which is, I've learned this from Mark Wilson at the Florida Chamber, who expresses this idea this way, and I think it's important. If you take this is the historian coming out too. So if you look at the 19th century, in so many ways, that was New York's century. That was the rise of big cities, the rise in the Northeast, the rise of industrialization. Atlantic migration drove growth in the Northeast, and New York City and state became the anchor of that. You go a century ahead and think about, it was really California was, the 20th century really belonged to California. Early on in agriculture and mining and so on, and towards the end of the century it was technology, particularly in the northern part of California. The question is, whose century is this? And I think it's going to be either Texas or Florida. And I like our chances. You think about Latin American migration, growth of the city, of the entire region. But to do that, it's going to take some great cities leading Florida. I again like Orlando's chances. I think the coast cities have some challenges with climate change. I think Orlando has a lot of self-confidence, a lot of the assets you need to build a great city. But to do that, we're going to have to do some more things right. We've got, just like UCF, we've got a great trajectory going over the last several decades. The question is, what are we going to look like in 20, 30 years? And I believe we need to pivot even faster to a focus on knowledge-based, in many cases, tech-based industries. And one thing we learned from Amazon, and I was right in the middle of writing that proposal was, ultimately it was about talent. They were very complimentary to who we are, what we've become, but they felt like our tech talent was still not quite as far along as the cities that they have selected. And we need to, that didn't surprise us. We know where we are. We think this is a great place to attract tech talent to. We know the university plays a huge role in that pipeline of talent, as do the K through 12 systems. But we really need to focus on that. And related to it is keeping tech talent here. And one of the things I'm spending a lot of time on these days is how do we do that through our early stage startup community? Because a lot of young people who have entrepreneurial interests want to get started on something, either joining a small company or starting one themselves. And if we don't create the right ecosystem here, they're going to go to Austin or Atlanta or San Francisco or Seattle, where I was earlier this week. And so we've got a lot, I think we understand the problem, and now we as a community need to focus on that. But I like our chances to answer your question.
Okay, Greg?
Yes, I mean, I looked at the Amazon proposal somewhat differently than most people did. So I mean, I didn't want to win.
After being in Seattle this week, I agree with you.
Yeah, so if you go to Seattle, I mean, it's Amazon, Amazon is morphed into, it's a company town. I mean, it's morphed its thing, and it has such influence, and it does a certain thing to housing prices and everything that I would have struggled as an urban planner with winning. I would have liked to come in the top 20. I think it's a compliment to your region to be in the conversation, and so that's where I'm sort of disappointed we're not yet in the conversation, and we aren't. We're not one of the top 20 metropolitan regions in the country right now. I think we can get there, and Thad sort of laid out a few things getting there. My observation is that our built environment stinks. It's in direct contrast to where talent wants to live. I mean, talent wants to live in urban, walkable, interesting places like Portland and Denver and Austin and Seattle, and Orlando is not that. We're the poster child for sprawl. And sprawl is not what talent-rich, smart, creative, intellectual people want. That's kind of like turning a barge. I mean, you don't rebuild your urban environment overnight. So And neither does Atlanta, by the way. I mean, it's not unique to Orlando.
My
So-
hometown.
But you look at what Atlanta's done. Okay, so Atlanta now has both. Atlanta still has sprawl, still has traffic, still has roads, but it's made significant progress, to Thad's point, in the past 10 years in building its in-town neighborhoods and its tech scene and its creative, and it's got better mass transit, and it's got a lot more independent restaurants and a lot more venture capital, and the logos they can put on their board now, Microsoft and whoever else is there, is way more impressive than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So that's sort of what we've got to do. We've got to look at other regions. Charlotte's done a nice job of this. It's sort of a both region. We've got to at least offer choice.
Yeah.
Instead of we're 90-something% sprawl now. We've got to offer choice and then do some of the stuff that we're doing well, just do it better so that we get known for it. And that's a big idea, though. So sometimes Thad and I talk about this stuff, and it's like you want to fix the whole region at one time. So I think the best way to do that, the only way we've kind of rationalized you can do that, is you got to start with catalytic projects. So Medical City, or Bridge and ICAM, or whatever they call that thing now. Bridge. And Creative Village, right? I mean, you got to do some of those things as essentially as your case study, and then be able to show the world that we get it, and we can bring the partnerships together to do it. And here's sort of a test case of how we built it, and then just convince everybody that that's going to, once everybody sees how great that is, it's going to kind of expand upon itself. So that's the challenge. We know what to do, right? I mean, Thad and I will tell you that Amazon crystallized sort of what we needed to do, and now it's a matter of can we get it done.
Now, you said Amazon and Seattle, it's kind of a one company kind of town. The criticism here would be with Disney, we're kind of a one company kind of town. Compare and contrast the two.
Yeah, so it's good that Disney's located where it is. It's difficult if you have a dominant corporate citizen that controls so much of the job market and so much of the wealth and whatnot. It's hard, and Amazon tries very hard in Seattle to make everything they do unique, but it's not. I mean, you can you can tell it's their campus. So if you think about like the classic suburban campus, that's essentially what Disney is a suburban campus, but it's just a tourism thing. So the fact that that's not in the core of our downtown is good. We ultimately can shape our future and shape our region and let them be here and be a part of it, but you're not you don't have to work them into everything you do, right? So you don't get hemmed in by the corporate giant. Because it is again, the idea of the overused words now are like authenticity and stuff like that. This is what millennials and talent want, and they all want a brew pub and a coffee place and all that stuff. Well, that's sort of in direct contrast to the corporate idea of everything and the Disney idea. Something's either made up or it's driven by corporate. So this is a real conflict, and so some of it is actually doing it, and some of it's creating the illusion of doing it. I always tell people if you go to Austin, Texas, the on-the-ground urbanism in Austin, Texas isn't that good either, but they've convinced everybody it is. But I mean, Giddy would tell us a lot to do with music, right? I mean, it has a vibe in Austin. And so some of that's Orlando's thing too, right? You hear us say, keep Austin weird, it's, right? Keep Orlando creative. We talk about how we got to get better on our brand. This is you don't know the half of it thing. So it's part of it's having people take you seriously, and then having enough on-the-ground built environment. And Disney's a part of the solution, not part of the problem because of where they are.
And a couple things. One, we shouldn't characterize Seattle as a one-company town. I spent 2 days on the Microsoft campus, which is 8 million square feet and 30,000 employees on that one site. So we would kill for that, right? But thinking of Disney, there are huge benefits that have come from that, which are brand awareness. Orlando is known everywhere. Infrastructure, we've built enormous infrastructure. We have an average of 1 million non-residents here every week, which means we had to build the infrastructure to support that. And that then, to do that with the airport and the road systems, that the $10 billion of construction we have in our transportation system underway right now, is a huge benefit to improving on that infrastructure that Craig pointed to. But it also means we have compared to many other cities, a huge low-wage employment base that we can only move the dial on with more knowledge-based jobs. Yeah. And then we also need to focus on, this is where all of us need to help. We talk a lot about, because they get the headlines, the recruitment in of companies, but every one of the great companies we're talking about, the great cities, the great driver of their economic prosperity were locally grown companies that thrived. They weren't, hey, we recruited a company in and then we built our city around that. They were locally, it was organic growth. And so we need to do, it's not one or the other, but we need to invest in the local growth.
And as we discussed in there over lunch, that connects to then their local investment in philanthropy
Right.
and their desire to see their home
That's right.
grow up.
Yep.
All right, question number 3 has to do with public and private partnerships. I was speaking with a commercial real estate leader just this week, and he said, you know, these things can be so controversial because they so often go south, that he felt the success of a public-private partnership was more rare than common. And they can be controversial when they go south and economically pull on the public purse and taxes. So could you speak to your views on these, since clearly Creative Village is such a public-private partnership? And how should taxpayer money be used or not used to incentivize development, job creation, or more?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the public-private partnership piece, and then I think Thad and I can both talk about incentives and how we do that. But so we're the city's partner in Creative Village, so we responded to a RFP type process. Our team got picked, they own the land, and we do all the development work.
The city owns the land.
The city owns
your
the land,
company does
and
the
our
work.
company does the development work. And so in that particular instance, there's no money interjected into the deal from the city. It's just they already own the land, so they already had the asset. It's where it used to be, before it was the Amway, the old Amway, it was the Central Florida Fairgrounds, if you remember, and the Expo Center, and it used to be cattle were shown there and all going way back, but it's always been a civic use there, right?
Yeah.
So having 68 acres owned by one entity, which happened to be the city of Orlando, that nobody lived on, so we're not displacing any one resident, that was attractive to the development community. So in this particular case, the circumstances of the public-private partnership were attractive to both sides. The city doesn't know how to be a real estate developer, and
you would agree?
I could have spent my whole life trying to assemble 68 acres in the middle of downtown. So it just ended up being those two things worked to both parties' advantage. I agree that if the public-private partnership doesn't have a clear benefit to the public partner and to the private partner, they can struggle. It's a buzzword. It's like the solution for everything. Everybody says just do a public-private partnership. I think that's an oversimplification. But in our case, there was business value to both sides, and we were willing to invest capital to do zoning entitlements and whatever, and wait and bring together partners and all this stuff over a long period of time, because there's enough upside to us, because we're not having to carry the land. I mean, if you were out trying to do this and you had to go buy the land and carry it, that would have eroded the deal. So.
And this peer said to me, it is because of timing that they often, whereas in Creative Village, the time has benefited
right,
this
so,
project, allowing partners to come to the table.
It's the most counterintuitive part about Creative Village is it's the opposite of net present value. You know, as a real estate guy, we're always taught, you know, you're trying to do what maximizes your dollars today, and you're trying to sell it. If you go to sell your house, I mean, you want to sell it now for the maximum. It's the opposite. There was value in waiting, and we set out with the idea of bringing together UCF and Valencia, and I never shy away from it. I mean, did I think this was going to happen? I hoped it was going to happen. I mean, I didn't go into this like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to do. I mean, I had some idea of who I thought the partners were going to be and who we were going to bring together. It's become bigger than that. I mean, Thad would tell you it's gotten more scale to it, but this was the idea all along, but you had to be patient enough to let that idea happen, and it became about the future long-term sort of sustainable use instead of this net present value kind of thing. And the project's gotten better by waiting. I mean, it's this weird thing in the sense that even when we were all the way to the finish line with Andy Gardner, and we got vetoed at the very last minute by Governor Scott, and we were all freaked out, and UCF, you know. But the project even got better by waiting a year for that, and it led to a retooling of how we're doing the housing and everything. And so it's just weird that time has
Helped you.
helped, yeah.
But to your question, the only reason that's true is because this was a public-private
Yeah,
partnership. So
that's what made
if
it.
that 68 acres was owned by Craig, he would have to monetize it.
It would be 3 to 5 story apartments.
Right.
Because I mean that's where the market was like that. It would have
Sure,
been. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we-
Because you got to pay taxes, you got to cover
oh
your
yeah, no, I
expenses.
mean,
Whereas you
listen.
have a public partner.
You
who
can be the
says-
nicest guy in the world, but at the end of the day, I mean, you know, I mean, your banker comes calling and all that stuff. And yes, I mean, if you don't own the land, you got to do something with it eventually.
Sure.
Yeah, unless like Joe Louis, you bought it for $1 an acre.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the other thing. When you guys see something like Medical City, this is family land, agricultural land, which we had a lot of in Florida. That bought a gazillion years ago, where your basis it's almost free. I mean, it's not quite free, but almost free.
Right,
So that would be
exactly, but yeah,
analogous.
Yeah, it's a different, right. So let me follow up on a couple things. Coming from the university, which is a public entity, when John Hitt came here 26 years ago, he committed, he had the aspiration for the university that it become America's leading partnership university, and never strayed from that. And more importantly, proved that over and over again. So things like UCF's role at Lake Nona, where it had this combination of accepting donated land, but investing heavily through state and philanthropy dollars to do something meaningful there. Later on, buying land from Tavistock to grow. I mean, it was this mix of commitments. But it is risky. It doesn't always work. Sanford Burnham is was a big swing, a huge swing, at a time when those were happening. It was actually not as big as some others around the state, but the state had a lot of money and leadership who wanted to invest in it, and it doesn't always work. Early on, when I was doing the work at Lake Nona, I thought, man, let's just go get as many incentives as we possibly can, because that was a day when they were out there. I think my thinking has matured a lot, which is that the places that are going to throw the most money at projects are the ones that have to, because they're missing other assets. They have other characteristics, and so they make up for it. It's a Band-Aid. Whereas what you ought to be doing is two things: focusing on your strengths and finding organizations that can benefit from those strengths, because you have unique value that you can provide that's non-monetary, but is real to the businesses or organizations that are trying to recruit. And the other is, when incentives are involved, make sure that they are clearly tied to metrics that do create value for the region. So, and I think the state has gotten much more disciplined about this, and the city and the county as well, where real job creation, particularly higher wage job creation, ought to be rewarded. It's a good return to the community if you have a modest incentive per job at certain salary levels, that there is great benefit out. But throwing crazy money at projects, first of all, I think is sort of almost a moot point. I just don't think we're going to see that very much. And I think, frankly, that's why it would be wonderful if Miami won, but they happen to live in a state right now where politically...
I don't think politically there's support for...
Right, so I'm frankly a little surprised that any Florida state city was on the final list for just...
Help us understand what you mean about Miami and Amazon.
Yeah, so Amazon, what's probably going to happen, Amazon did a few things really smart, but I mean, they've opened up a bidding war. I mean, let's face it, the top, they know where they want to go. But I mean, but the top 20 cities are going to compete against each other. The incentive package will be in the billions of dollars. And politically, Florida, the legislature has not shown an appetite for that lately. I mean, we're really cutting incentives and business relocation funds and everything. So I don't think Florida is going to be a major player. I think Canada won't be either. Toronto won't be a major player in doing that. But a lot of the northeastern cities will be. New Jersey will offer billions of dollars in incentives because they need to. And so that's really what Florida doesn't need. First of all, we don't need to do that, and we don't have a political climate right now that is in the mood to do any of that. And you've got some failures, all based on certain circumstances. But Scripps and Burnham and some of these things that don't end up going the way you want. It's you wouldn't stand up right now if you're an elected politician and sort of go champion the next one, because there's just a lot of political risk in doing that. So we will, you're gonna get one eventually. I mean, if you shoot enough layups, it's gonna go in. It's just got to get easier, right? I mean, as you keep doing these things, and it'll be, when you do win, you want to win the right one. I mean, the last thing you want to do is either win when you're not ready, or get the wrong one that doesn't end up fitting or doesn't grow the jobs like they want. So it's just, what he's talking about is absolutely true, is that this person's got to strategically align with the strengths of your region already and just be convinced that they're better off being here because it's here. And then if there ends up being a modest incentive package and it's performance-based and it's based on jobs, or we do infrastructure or something, or job training or whatever that facilitates that company being able to have a better workforce, those things make sense, but those are much more modest than what you're going to see with Amazon. I mean, Amazon's going to get billions of dollars thrown at it.
One last thing on that, and that's why the deliberate strategy of building innovation clusters around the region is really important. So Lake Nona, because of what's happened there, is going to attract, you're already starting to see it now, organizations that just align with, yes, the broader region matters to them, the state tax structure, all those things, but there are things about Lake Nona that really matter to them, and that's why they end up there. What we're doing at Creative Village and what's happening overall downtown, I think, is going to attract a different kind of organization, but one that will see great value here, bring great value, I think those will be companies that want to be more in an urban core. They see the talent pool that's going to be with a big university and a state college right there. The sort of feel, the vibe of a downtown, all those things are real selling features that other places can't have. So I think that's got to be what we create.
Well, Thad, that actually is great because it gets to question number 4, which has to do with gentrification. So we've got Creative Village on one side of Paramore, Lift Orlando and all the work they're doing around the Citrus Bowl. I've been very interested and grateful for those that we know at this church that are a part of that. Help us understand gentrification. Is it impossible to avoid because of the hidden hand in market forces? Or what are the ways that we can be mindful about the community development, which is so very much at the core of both of your agendas? How do we see gentrification managed well in this community?
I think Craig ought to start on this one because he is extremely thoughtful about it. We have a lot of conversations. We're doing a lot of things. But Craig has studied this phenomenon in cities all over the country. And I want you to tee that one up.
So the gentrification is not a 4-letter word. It's gotten a bad rap. But just sort of understand, by definition, you're either for the status quo or you're for gentrification. I mean, those are the only 2 choices. It's either going to stay the way it is or get, I hope not get worse, but I mean, the 2 choices are make it better or have it stay the same.
And in making better, property values go up.
So all boats rise is the idea, but all boats rising can have some consequences, mostly in the affordable housing and displacing long-term residents. So what I would tell you is there is no perfect answer to it, but the answers that I've been the most impressed with have been where you have an educational and a government partner, because part of their job is to influence outcomes that have to do with educating the children in a neighborhood, or in the city's case, building affordable housing and everything. So private developer, hopefully present company excluded, but most private developers left to their vices, I mean, gentrification is not an issue to them. I mean, they just want to build real estate and make money. But yet if you're partnered with an education institution, a healthcare institution is another good partner to have, and a civic or government institution, such that the overall plan sort of addresses gentrification, then you're in good shape. When Dr. Hitt announced the commitment to UCF Downtown, he said, we're committed to Paramore, we're committed to positively impacting Paramore. You're going to change today, no, not today because A school's open. Last year, if you were born in Paramore, educational opportunity was not great. In a couple years, if you're born in Paramore, you've got access to a brand new $60 million state-of-the-art PK through 8 school. You've got Boys and Girls Club, all the resources that wrap around that. You've got Jones, you've got Valencia, you've got UCF, you've got a unprecedented access to education. And that's the quickest way to change the trajectory of a neighborhood that suffered from disinvestment, right, is to provide access to education. So that's good, but the smarter and more well-educated the Paramore residents are, by definition, some of them are going to choose to move out or choose to move to a nicer house. That's gentrification. But that's gentrification that you created by making everybody in the neighborhood better off. So that's okay, right? It's not you just kicking people out because something more expensive came along. So that's why I say there's sort of these nuances to it. And the other piece is when we went in with our plan, the city had certain parameters around our response. We had to set aside 15 acres-ish for the catalytic anchor tenant, which ends up being UCF Valencia. And we had to set aside a third of our...
What's the ish part?
The ish, 15 acres.
Is
it 15 acres?
You want more acres, don't you?
He wants more land all the time.
It's that office. It's that office.
And then we had to set aside about a third of our housing units to be mixed income housing. So we weren't allowed to build a financial model that just said we could go build market rate apartments and be done with it.
That
we had to
excludes dorms.
Yeah, and then we come back in and layer the dorm piece in. So when we go build the dorms with UCF, we made a commitment to their board that you will not be priced out of the dorms as compared to the cost of a dorm on the main campus. So roughly speaking, it's not down to the exact dollar, but if it's $700 and something to live in a dorm situation on the main campus, it's $700 and something to live in a dorm situation in the downtown campus. So that was, we were sensitive to it amongst the Paramore residents and amongst the student body.
We're all working really hard to make sure Craig doesn't make too much money on it.
That is the one outcome. but if you don't have a master plan, back to Thad's point about a public-private partnership. If you don't have a master plan and you don't have we ultimately have a government zoning document that holds us to all these things, right? If you don't have that, I think you got to be careful, because you can say all the right things and
Sure.
whatnot, and the market could change on you, whatever. So the fact that we are, I mean, the zoning regulations sort of require.
But even with a master plan, there's something in Craig that's okay with not the bigger profit,
Right.
at least in a financial sense.
Right.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that's true. And there are more of people like me than you'd think. So that's the good news, that are in the financial business. I mean,
Name a couple.
the Bank of America Community Development Corporation is a wholly owned subsidiary of the bank that only invests in affordable housing.
Okay.
And it meets the Reinvestment Act requirements for a bank that they have to reinvest
they turn
in the
a profit.
community. And they turn a profit, but they do it only by investing. They did City View in Paramore. So you got to get aligned with a partner like that. They make money, but they sort of make a reasonable return, and they execute their mission, right? We get hooked up with KUD as our development partner on the student housing. They're a great partner of the University of Central Florida. KUD, is a very wealthy subsidiary of a huge Japanese corporation. They make a reasonable return for working on college campuses, civic projects, stadiums, and everything. But they do not sort of go out and seek just only the highest return for the best deal. They sort of have this proven track record. They're a longtime partner of the university. So you can align with enough people that see a bigger vision. It's not easy, but I don't want to act like it's completely. There are a lot of cities and a lot of projects that have been built because enough people did align, and they said, we'll make a reasonable profit, but we'll sort of do the right thing.
Why? For them, for you? Why?
Well, okay, so a couple reasons. Believe it or not, you can actually go raise money. Thad and I could go start a fund, even a tech fund or whatever, based on we're only going to invest in green buildings, or we're only going to invest in young people with great ideas or whatever. And there are a lot of wealthy people that drink the Kool-Aid about, it's the same reason somebody gives $1 million to the Art Center or to United Way or to a church. I mean, they want to affect an outcome, and they'll invest in funds that sort of try to get that outcome. And this is where a lot of the money for affordable housing comes, a lot of the money for student housing comes. Our equity partner is attracted to things that serve students. They were influenced by education. They benefited from education. So,
So I hear you saying the why is cause-driven?
Yeah, so not completely. So, always come back to this idea of you still make a reasonable return, right? But I use the analogy of talking to a community banker. And if you guys have, if you have a relationship with a community banker versus a guy who works at one of the really huge banks, the community banker would tell you, we're here to make a reasonable return. We're not here for our bank to go out of business, but we're really here to serve the community and to help small business and to do whatever. So you can make a similar equation to sort of that's how we sort of give our pitch. We say and Lyft is saying the same thing. I mean, they're not in it to lose money,
right?
But it's to bring like-minded people together who kind of all see the world the same way, and then you can kind of get done. And then UCF falls into that too, right? I mean, the university doesn't go out and make dumb financial decisions. I mean, they're not in it to go write you a blank check. It's a return on investment, but yet if your mission is education, you can see that a little bit differently.
And I think I'd add to that we've seen plenty of examples, particularly urban university examples, where they choose more to go in and build an oasis in the middle of the city and not engage. And they're either walls around the campus, either hard or virtual. But UCF, this is back to, I think,
gentrification.
Well, it's also back to culture
Yeah.
and mission and philosophy. And the university, under President Hitt's leadership, and before that, I think the history of the university has been, it is a community asset and contributor, and it has a responsibility to behave that way. And then as we began to imagine an urban presence, it opened up all kinds of new things that we ought to be active in. So we've begun to work on an overall strategy, really inspired by some of the work that Lyft Orlando has done. We've identified with the Paramore community, I mean, in a perfect world, we get Lyft to come and take in the rest of Paramore and work with us on that. But their whole model is place-based and
Clearly defined,
and that would disrupt that. But we can learn from them and do some similar things. So we've, with the Paramore community, identified 5 key areas that we believe are necessary to focus on and invest in order to help strengthen that community. Being very careful not to come in and say, we have all the answers, we know what, we're going to fix your community. It's the exact wrong thing to do. Yeah. But those 5 are not surprising, but they are, I think, they're a complete list. It's education, of course, to Craig's point. We've got to transform the education system. The ACE school makes a huge difference. Safety and security. Can my child walk home safely to and from school? Job creation. How do we so many things fall off out of that. If I don't have a living wage job, and I'm not getting help in finding one or being better prepared for one, it's not gonna work. Healthy community. It's a food desert. There's a whole group of things that cascade off of that, and then affordable housing. And so, each one of those, if as a university, we might just focus on education and ignore all the others, and we'd be completely missing the boat.
Sure.
And so we've learned from other places. We have to focus on all 5. The good news is we're attracting some philanthropic partners on each of those who say, I get it, I know how we can help and we want to help. And so it's going to take arms and legs and money and focus, but we think we can make a difference.
Question number 5, I think, would appeal to everyone in here, because you may or may not ever even visit the Creative Village campus, or certainly have an investment or project going on, but it pertains to leadership. And what are some of your rhythms in exercising good leadership? So like on a daily, weekly, or annual basis, how do you keep yourselves fresh? How do you keep growing and stretching so that even when this project is well on its way, you're ready for the next one?
Yeah, so I mean, everybody comes at this from different angles, right? But, and everybody, I think, sometimes you meet someone like Thad, they're very similar to the way you view the world, and other times you meet great leaders and you figure out what their habits are, and you're kind of like, wow, I wonder how that guy makes that, or gal makes that work. But I think he and I are similar in a sense that, so in the urban development world, you have to be a voracious reader. I mean, you have to have this appetite for reading, not just about what you do for a living, but reading about life and about culture and about cities and about art and about everything that sort of contributes to this great well-being. And you have to sort of have this idea. I talk about being healthy, and I think about that sort of like spiritually and emotionally and physically, right? And you sort of have to stay sharp and think about it that way. And so I'm always so curious. I mean, Thad and I trade all these articles all the time, but you're so curious about you just have to have this intellectual curiosity about what's going on in other places, and you have to be competitive. I mean, you have to have this idea that somebody's doing it better than you, or somebody's winning this competition, right? Or UCF's sort of famous for saying we got to figure out a better way to do things all the time. So that's the way my mind is wired, to always figure that out. So I mean, I sort of wake up every day with that going, which maybe is a burden, but but that's just the way I wake up every day. So that works good for me. And then I do feel so I graduated college, and I thought I wanted to go to work in New York City. I had interned at the Urban Land Institute in DC. I was this urban guy. What was Orlando going to be? And I thought that's what I wanted to go do. Mike and I would tell you, all our friends moved to Atlanta. Atlanta was the big place to go and work for a big accounting firm. Whatever. So I came home. My grandfather was still alive then. He was a citrus guy from Winter Garden, and he's a great entrepreneur. And he was like, I think Orlando might be the appropriate size pond for you. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's not so small that nothing's happening, but it's not so big where you can't move the needle. It's sort of in that growth stage. And I said, okay, that's something to think about. And then before I left, he said, I go a bit further, and I say, I feel like you have a responsibility to come back here and make a difference. He's like, I think your family has put you in a situation where you owe it to your community to do something good for Orlando. And I mean, how do you say no to that? It's your, but I mean, that is what I feel. I mean, I feel like I've been given a certain set of circumstances that I would be a fool if I didn't take advantage of. And so
that's part of the why.
Yeah, that's the why, right? So if you feel blessed like that and that you don't take advantage of your circumstances, I think then you're missing out. So that's just the way I'm wired. So for better or for worse, but
we'll take it. Yeah.
I thought Craig said that really well. We are similar in a lot of that. A couple things that have helped drive me. One is family. I grew up in a family. My folks were committed. They were mission driven. They were about making a difference in the lives of young people, and I've seen that in so many examples where people will come up to me and said, I was a student of your dad's, or your mom taught me this, and those life lessons are really important. I married an amazing woman who keeps my perspective in so many different ways. We're blessed with 3 wonderful children. So all those things, I think, just drive me. My wife got me into yoga. That doesn't hurt. It's kind of cool.
Have you heard about yoga with goats?
No.
I'm so glad. It's this new phenomenon where these baby goats jump around. So let's just keep that out of Creative Village.
yeah, right.
And then to be able to work with people who share a vision and a mission. every day inspired by the people I work with. And that's just within UCF, within the city, guys like Craig and his team. Valencia is an amazing partner in everything we're doing. And so, and I think a lot of that, for all of us, comes out of this. We feel like we have this incredible responsibility, and we also have this incredible learning opportunity, this curiosity, which is sort of part of what universities are about anyway, is a really important motivator for me.
I use the leadership example all the time with UCF and Valencia. I mean, can you think of two people that have a more different personalities than Dr. Hitt and Dr. Sugar? I mean, they're just completely different leaders, but equally as effective. I mean, and they both get it, and they both understand everything that we're talking about, and they're totally on the same page, but a different view of the sort of what gets them to the answer. So that just goes to show you that there's this sort of different ends to get to the same result.
It works. All right, last question, question number 6. At first I thought, imagine it's 2030, and then I thought, that's just 12 years from now. Like, we can see 2030 really around the corner. So let's say 2050. Creative Village is off and running. You've done 4 more projects, and you're a great-grandfather at that point. Tell us...
Because of yoga.
Oh, because of the yoga.
It keeps me going.
Keep it up. Help us see downtown Orlando, maybe the region. Help us see Paramore.
Okay, so at that point, UCF Downtown is going to have 20,000 plus students. I mean, it's going to be, I still don't think people understand the scale. Georgia Tech in downtown Atlanta has like 15,000 students, right? So, I mean, we're almost very quickly, this is going to be one of the largest universities in the southeastern United States on a standalone basis. So,
do you know what Georgia State has?
Georgia State's a big school too in downtown Atlanta, more students. But I'm just saying that if you think, said a different way, UCF's growing like this, and if you don't think it's going to keep growing like this, you're kind of kidding yourself. I mean, it's just a function of what y'all's growth been in the last, gone from 65,000 students in a couple decades, right? I mean, it's an incredible growth trajectory.
About 26 when President Hitt got here 25 years ago. It's 66,000 now.
Right. So I mean, that's going to be the one thing. It's just the scale of what's going to be down here on the UCF Valencia downtown campus is going to be huge. And I would hope that really the main thing that we've done is what Thad pointed to is we've grown a couple. I hope that at that point, Fat Merchant or somebody is this world-renowned company that we grew, tech company that we grew here in Orlando, or PlanSource or Power DMS, or somebody that's here, has grown into the next big thing and are housed at Creative Village. I think that'd be really a homegrown success story for us, and that's what we want. And then I think we want, to Thad's point, I think we want this idea, we want to be a great college downtown. We want to be the way you think about some urban areas that have that vitality, that intellectual spirit to them that a college gives you. And it's not isolated out all in East Orange County, but a lot of it's downtown. There's a certain quality of life to an active student population. It's just young people sort of keeping everybody young and keeping a city young, and having those smart people stay here. I mean, we call what he talked about brain drain. So brain drain is when all the smart people leave, graduate from UCF and they leave. So if we were no longer brain draining, and if we're really, really smart, at that point, if smart students were graduating maybe virtually, walking across the stage at that point, and getting their degree from UCF Downtown, and they were staying here. Yeah. And they say, well, I stayed here because downtown became this great place I wanted to be.
We're hoping our fellows stay here.
Right. Yeah. That's it. I mean, that's probably the ultimate measure for me.
Okay. Ed?
No, I think that's a great description of what that vision looks like. First of all, we're focused on this, and you all are here, focusing on continuing to focus downtown, to transform downtown, I think is critical to that. Great cities have great downtowns, as the mayor has always said. If we do Creative Village and our campus within it right, it will be an anchor of a much broader set of things that happens downtown. And so I think that's going to be critical. We need to see a shift in this wage differential, and we have to be deliberate about that. And so continuing to, I heard an example this week about compared Jamaica and Singapore, who both became independent states within 2 years of each other in the mid-'60s. They had about the same GDP when they started. Jamaica made the bet that they could continue to grow their tourism business, and that was kind of their focus. I'm oversimplifying. Singapore went a very different direction and built a knowledge-based economy, and their GDP is, I don't know, 8 times what Jamaica is. And we need to think that way here.
Sure.
In Orlando, probably in the whole state, imagining this being a very different economy. It's going to physically look very different, but what's the makeup of the population here, and how have we, and we think as a university which is focused on inclusiveness and embracing first time in college families, the trick is that half of the population that today doesn't even imagine themselves getting a college degree. If we can mine that talent, and talent and potential is blind to economic and social background,
Set it free.
we can do amazing things. But we have to think that way, and we have to do it well.
Well, we are so grateful to have you here today. As a token of our appreciation, we've got some pullovers that are branded collaborative on that we're glad to give you. Friends, please welcome and thank these guests for being with us.
Thank you.